I figured we'd do a countdown today, and since we're already past the halfway mark of this year, it's time to talk about the films that I feel are the best and worst of 2018 so far this year. This way it gives you a little bit of an update on what I think about the movies so far this year, and talk about some of the ones that I didn't get time to review yet. Obviously, let's throw out the disclaimers now. First off, this is what I feel are the best movies so far this year, and you could have a completely different opinion, which obviously is completely fine. Also, this is the first half of this year. This is talking about movies that came out in January of 2018 to June of 2018. Anything released on a wide release in the US July or later will not be included in this list or counted. Another big disclaimer that a lot of people disagree with me with, and that's completely understandable, is I look at the wide release of the film, wide release in the country I live in. So, for the movies that had a limited release date in the US in December of last year, but a wide release in January or even later in 2018, then I consider the movie a 2018 film. So, you're probably going to see some movies on this list that you might think, that's not 2018, that's 2017. Well, it's because of the wide release in the US, and a lot of movies in January had limited releases in December, but wide releases in January of the next year. And of course, even though I've seen a lot of movies this year, I haven't seen all the movies this year, and I haven't seen all the films that I want to see yet. Now, I do have two honorable mentions that could move higher up the list if I rewatch them, because, let's face it, a lot of these movies that I'm going to list off I've only seen once, and sometimes when you see a movie multiple times, you start to have different opinions of them, or you start to notice things that you didn't notice the first time. So, bear in mind, everything on this list is subject to change and swap places. But I feel two movies that came out the first half of this year that just didn't quite make the top 20 for me, but could still move up, are Unsane and Hostiles. Didn't quite make the mark. With the first two films on my list, we start with some pretty depressing films. And let's start off with the thriller. My number 20 is Red Sparrow. Now, I really do love some really dark and serious espionage thrillers, ones that are suspenseful and very slow burning. Red Sparrow is that for me this year. I like both the performances of Jennifer Lawrence and Joel Edgerton, and pretty much the entire cast of this movie. Now, if you're a fan of the espionage thrillers that are fun and action-packed and just really a blast to watch, Red Sparrow is definitely not that for you, because this is one of those really dark, depressing, and bleak films. And sometimes I can really like that in a movie, especially if it's a story that's meant to be like that. And Red Sparrow is brutal, it is dark, it is bleak and depressing, but it's definitely meant to be. I am still curious on what I will think about the movie once I rewatch it eventually, but for now, it is my number 20 of the first half of the year so far. Now, my number 19 is yet another really dark and depressing film, and I have a good feeling that it could bump even higher up on my list once I rewatch it and revisit it. It is You Were Never Really Here. After seeing the trailer for this film, I was super excited in seeing it, but had a feeling that our theaters just wouldn't get it. Thankfully, this is one of the few movies that our theaters did get that is more independent or artsy and isn't part of the normal mainstream movies. Judging from the trailer, I knew this was going to be artistic, I knew this was going to be a head scratcher and one that I have to pay attention to, but I also thought it was going to be a thriller, and it's less so of a thriller than I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, I'm not mad at it not being a thriller, but this definitely is more of a character piece, and if you love character piece and like just exploring the main character of the film and just a character study of him, then you're going to really like this movie, I feel. You Were Never Really Here is also one of those films that has one of the best performances of the year so far for me by our main character, by the actor Joaquin Phoenix. Look, he's a great actor, but I haven't seen him this good in a long time. I have a feeling that by the end of the year, he will be one of my favorite leading actors in a movie of 2018. Now, the reason I don't have this higher on my list initially is because even though I really enjoyed it, thought it was a great character piece, really great acting, there was something about the editing, the messiness, that I didn't quite like. And there's a few things where it cuts away from the violence in very random ways that I don't feel worked for the film. And I can understand why they're in the film and why it's meant to be a little discombobulated, because it's trying to emulate the state of mind of our main character, because this is one of those movies where it gets really into the head of the main character, but by telling you visually rather than someone actually say it. This is definitely one of those movies you have to study and pick apart and really get into it, so this is definitely not the film for a lot of people, but I highly enjoyed it and hope it might bump up a little higher once I see it again. Yeah, looking at my current number 18 of the first half of the year, You Were Never Really Here definitely can get bumped up, because my number 18 is Insidious: The Last Key. Now look, it's definitely not one of those films that's really important and really stating something like You Were Never Really Here might be, but I am a sucker for a really good, intense horror film, and Insidious: The Last Key, while it might be one of the weaker entries of the franchise, it's still one that I had a blast with. I was actually scared and creeped out. There was some really good effective jump scares that didn't annoy me. And there's some really good direction within it that I wasn't expecting from a director that made, I think he made something that I didn't like. Hold on, let me check. Never mind, the director of this movie wrote something that I didn't like, and that was Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. You know, the last Paranormal Activity movie that will probably ever be made. I feel that his directing skill in this movie was actually pretty darn good. I like the characters, I like some of the backstory, I like the slow burn and how it's more of a mystery. I will say that the humor does irk me from time to time. It's not all the humor, just the humor revolved around two guys wanting a young girl, or a young teenage or young woman. Those kind of things, that kind of humor was a little creepy. Other than that, I thought Insidious: The Last Key was a pretty solid horror movie, one that I did enjoy, and one that is really weird seeing in January. Alright, my number 17 is another movie that can get bumped up a little higher most likely, and it is Love, Simon. I thought this was really funny, I thought this was cute. I actually really dug the story and really liked the characters and the acting involved. Even though I wouldn't say that I disliked the trailer did make me think that, okay, this could be okay, I'm not sure. The trailer does get me at the last joke of the trailer, which I think is really darn funny, and I thought, okay, if the movie is like that more, I think I'm going to really enjoy it. And thankfully it is, and granted it could be your typical indie drama, comedy, kind of rom-com-ish high school coming-of-age story. The only difference is that our main character is gay. A character who's gay and hasn't come out to anyone yet, except for a person he talks to online. And while some of the issues in the movie might be a little too lighthearted for some, I think that there is impact in the movie, and I think there is entertainment, and it's just one of those really good indie, dramedy, romances, if you want to call it that. Alright, my number 16 is a film that I have seen multiple times now, and it's kind of been on a roller coaster because some days I watch it and it gets higher up on the list, other days I don't like it as much and so it goes down, and so this one's been up and down for me, and it's also a movie that you might consider a 2017 film because it was nominated for Best Picture, I believe, of 2017, and it's The Post. Now look, I know what you're thinking. Out of all the movies that were nominated for Best Picture last year, this, along with a few others, might have been the easy, safe bet. This one was definitely one of the more Oscar baity type films. But I never really want to discredit a movie for just feeling like it's a typical Oscar bait movie, because sometimes the typical Oscar bait movies are still really solid movies. And for me, I thought The Post was definitely really solid, and it was better than The Darkest Hour for me, which for me, The Darkest Hour was the weakest of the Best Picture nominations, I feel. Though I haven't seen all of them yet, because I haven't seen The Phantom Thread yet, or Call Me By Your Name. There might have been one more that I haven't seen yet, I can't remember. Now, while The Post isn't the greatest of films, and most likely it'll be bumped down a little bit more as I rewatch some of these films, I still feel it's a solid film worth mentioning, and it has some great performances by both Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, and almost the entire supporting cast. It has some really good cinematography, some really good score. Despite it being about a newspaper and people talking to each other, it was still a very engaging movie. It was still an entertaining movie. There was snappy dialogue that I really loved, and it's still an important tale to tell. Alright, my number 15 is a film that we recently got, thank goodness, and I was actually able to see. And surprisingly, it's a documentary. I do like documentaries from time to time. There is some really great ones out there. But it is rare for a documentary to make it this high on the list, even for a middle of the year countdown. My number 15 is Won't You Be My Neighbor. If I would have watched Mr. Rogers when I was a kid, maybe this movie would be higher on my list, because a lot of people that are Mr. Rogers fans, grew up watching him, are more emotionally connected with this film. I never watched him as a kid, and I knew of him and knew of his show. So when I actually watched this film and saw just how radical he was, I thought, damn, I wish I would have seen it. He's a very interesting person, a very influential person. The trailer for this film, for this documentary, got me every time I saw it. The score for the film was great. The clips they show are great. I really do get a sense of the man, the legend, and his goal in life, some of his doubts, and it's structured in a very fluid way. The one extra thing that knocks it down a little further down the list than some might have it is your typical documentary in structure, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are some really unique documentaries out there that are a little bolder in the structure and in the types of things they're telling and how they go about telling those things. One nice, really awesome touch I feel for this documentary is the animation sequences added into it, and I think those were really great. Alright, my number 14 is probably the best pure comedy in my list. Then again, I don't know if I can call it pure comedy, because there was thriller aspects to it as well, and there is some crime drama. Well, anyway, my number 14 is Game Night. And to be honest, this was probably, out of all the comedies that I've seen so far this year, this is the most I've laughed in the theater. Almost every joke in this film works for me. I was laughing through almost the entirety of the film, and when a comedy does that, you have no choice but to love it. There are also some really great aspects that set it apart from your typical comedy. There is some really good thriller-esque action scenes. The camera itself is darker and more in tune with a thriller, and there is some parody involved and satire with that thriller genre. Even the camera work, there is some really good one-shot motions with the camera with scenes that I was actually pretty damn impressed with. Now, a lot of the actors play a lot of the same kind of characters that they normally play in these types of comedies, but I thought they did a really damn good job. And for me, whenever Jesse Plemons is on screen, he steals the scene for me in Game Night. Alright, my number 13 is the superhero sensation that you either absolutely love and consider one of the better Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, or you think it's mediocre and get worried that you'll be considered racist. For me, I do really enjoy this movie. It could get bumped down a little bit as I rewatch it, because a lot of the people I know think it's just mediocre. My number 13 is Black Panther. And for me, it is kind of hard explaining what it is I like about it and trying to figure out what it is that makes it so mediocre to some people. For me, I had a blast watching it, and I thought everyone was great in it. It was a really fun, good origin story for an MCU movie. It has one of the best villains that I think the MCU has had. Maybe not the best, but definitely one of the top 5, I'd imagine. Plus, it also helps that it is Michael B. Jordan playing him, which I think he's a phenomenal actor. I will say that the climactic battle at the end and the rhinos and a few other elements of it weren't as good and just felt rushed and just sort of just throw everything out there for the climax. But overall, I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a solid origin story. Even though I guess it technically isn't an origin story, but it kind of feels like one. Alright, my number 12 is another superhero movie. This one is animated. It is Incredibles 2. Now, to be fair, it's been a while since I've seen Incredibles, but I remember really enjoying it and it being one of my favorite Pixar films. And for Incredibles 2, I think it's just as good, or at least very close to it. Now, you could argue that it is the same movie, just roles are swapped and a few other differences. Sure, but I really did enjoy this movie, and I thought it still had the same spirit. A lot of the same attention and love was put into this movie, and I highly enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was fun and vibrant. I loved the score. I loved the visuals. I loved the superheroes. There were a few things here and there that did irk me and I didn't like as much, but a lot of those things were very minor and very few flaws. I don't know what else to say, but it succeeded at being a really fun, engaging superhero movie that was vibrant. It was amazing. It was action-packed. It was funny. It was all the things I wanted an Incredibles movie to be. Alright, my number 11 could get bumped a little higher. It's a sci-fi horror thriller, and it's from the same person that brought us the first Saw movie, who wrote all the Insidious movies, directed the third one, and now he brings us Upgrade. To be honest, I thought this movie was really damn great. It was entertaining. I love that it's a indie science fiction action horror movie, and it shows that you can still make movies of that type with a low budget and still make it look good, presentable, and really show that it just can be done still. Granted, there are a few other movies that probably show that as well that are low budget. I mean, Ex Machina probably had a low budget. But there was something unique about Upgrade that makes you really appreciate that this kind of stuff can still be done. And it might be brutal and violent, but there's some really great restraint to this movie that I wasn't expecting. And I thought it was just going to be a fun, action-packed ride, and it is. But there is a little bit of restraint to the drama and a lot of the things that you could expect in an indie film that is trying to be dramatic within the genres. It was actually pretty smart with its twists and it leading you into a bunch of different red herrings. And for me, the ending worked because even though it has an ending that might be typical of that genre, I mean, just think that, oh, it's a guy with an AI in his head, and you could probably think of exactly what the twist is and how it's going to end. But there's enough red herrings sprinkled within and enough things that keep you guessing something else that when it actually happens, it's like, oh, I actually am kind of surprised it happened. I also think Logan Marshall Green was really damn great in this film, and he's going to be another one of those actors that I feel have one of the better performances of the year, at least in my opinion.